Hi, my name is Jessie Cruikshank, and I wanted to talk to you today about leading in your brokenness. So there's a lot of advice out there on about as a leader, you got to keep your game face because you have to inspire confidence in the people, and that confidence would be confidence in you. There's advice about not showing your weakness, not being vulnerable, and those kinds of things. And that is handed out as advice that is considered wisdom by our culture, by ministry leaders, and that sort of thing. And so I kind of want to just say up front that I don't think that's good advice, and then spend just a little bit of our time together here to just unpack that and explain why. So my leadership that I grew and learned and God taught me so much as a leader was by leading expeditions. And on an expedition, you have good days and you have bad days, and you have days that you're tired, and you have days that you didn't sleep well. And for me, I also had a food sensitivity at the time, and I didn't know what it was. And so there were days I was just sick, and then sick, and then you don't feel well, and sick, and you don't feel very strong. And yet you're still the leader. You're still carrying a pack. You're still hiking miles over terrain. You're still ascending a mountain. I have spent a lot of days in the wilderness and in the backcountry, not feeling very good. But not that whether I felt like I was a winner and on top of the world and super strong, or whether I felt like I was broken or sick or weak, it didn't change the fact that I was a leader of the expedition, right? So there was me and at least one other leader, sometimes two, because we always led in teams. But my position as a leader was non-negotiable. Just so one way to think about that is like whether or not you're a parent, right? You either are a parent or you're not. It's not a negotiated position. It's not a negotiated role. So for me and in my paradigm, leadership is not a negotiated role. Either you've been assigned that role, and I believe that comes by the providence of God, or you haven't. And if you've been assigned the role, then you need to move forward in a certain kind of confidence and understanding that God's the one who put you there. It's not a negotiated position. That allows you to actually have some freedom then. So if you are in a leadership role or leadership responsibility, you're not performing in order to have it. Now, the rest of the world is not going to necessarily agree with you in there, and the enemy is not going to agree with you in there. The enemy is going to try to get you to perform. But you have to step back from that temptation and that draw and say, God has put me here, and God has put me here. And so that is something that I have to move forward as me. It's because when you lead in your brokenness, you have to come to terms with the fact that you are human and you are broken and you are the leader. So as the leader, you don't abdicate that. You don't throw up your hands and say, oh, I'm having a bad day, I guess I'm not the leader today. Just like if you're a parent and you're sick, you don't just get to throw up your hands and be like, I can't be a parent to my toddler today because I'm sick. Like, no, you move forward in that. You still have responsibilities in that. You still have accountability in that. So when you're the leader and you're not feeling so great, what it does teach you is to ask for what you need. So for me, when I would be in the backcountry, maybe I'm not feeling super strong for whatever reason, and I need to ask someone to take a piece of the weight that I'm carrying, a piece of the weight that I'm carrying in my backpack, and I just need a little bit of that extra help that day. Or maybe I need a little extra sleep. So I'm gonna sleep in and maybe not be part of making breakfast, but come in for breakfast with permission from the rest of the group, that they understand and agree to step into that space. Or maybe I need prayer because it's just my heart is just hurting, or I'm feeling scared, or some different kinds of emotions. And so what I need is not for them to change the circumstances, but to just pray for me and pray for my courage and remind me of the things that I need to know. All of those things can happen even while you're the leader. So as the leader, then the question is, if it's not to perform and inspire confidence and courage, the question is then what is the purpose of a leader, and what is the accountability for a leader? Well, to that I go back to what Jesus did. And Jesus was broken in front of his disciples. Jesus had expressed frustration in front of his disciples. Jesus expressed sorrow and his heart broke, and he cried in front of his disciples. Jesus, even in the garden, expressed some despair and some struggle in front of his disciples. So hiding your emotions is not what Jesus did as a leader. Jesus was very honest with his emotions. But what Jesus didn't do is he didn't require his disciples to come and fill those emotions. He got that from the Father. And so as he was being open with how he was feeling and open with his emotions, he didn't look to others to complete that. He looked and demonstrated getting that from the Father. So even when he was frustrated, he didn't ask the disciples to behave better. He asked for grace. Even when he was sad and weeping over Lazarus dying, he didn't ask the disciples to come and to make the circumstances different. He demonstrated seeking and getting that comfort from God and the truth that he knew there. When he was in the garden and just really struggling with the cross and that whole scene that goes down, he just asked for prayer from the disciples, right? He didn't ask them to change the circumstances. He didn't ask them to give him courage. He just asked for them to intercede and to pray with him. So what I see Jesus demonstrating is not hiding your emotions, but in your emotions, you're looking to the source of the Father. You're looking to the source of God to fill that space. Now that creates an extremely different narrative for leadership. Instead of the leader being the one with all the answers, instead of the leader being God incarnate, which is when you expect your leader to be perfect and you look to them to be perfect, and if they're not perfect and they're not qualified to be a leader, that's actually an idolatry of the leader, because you're looking to them to be Jesus, and the leader is never Jesus, right? I can never be as perfect as Jesus. I'm broken and I'm limited. So when either you require that of yourself or the people that you lead require that, that's an idolatry. Instead, the leader points people towards Jesus, because as a leader, I'm not trying to make people followers of me. I'm trying to make people followers of Jesus and point their face to that. So if I can demonstrate, here's my emotion, here's my brokenness, and here's how I look to Jesus to fill that, then that points people as the answer to Jesus. If I say, oh, I'm perfect and I've got this all together, and I'm either faking it or I'm thinking too highly of myself, or I just, whatever that is, if I think I'm the answer, then I'm making followers of me. So that's why I wouldn't agree with the advice of presenting this perfect face all the time and worrying about whether or not I'm inspiring courage in myself from the followers. That's the wrong thing. I want to inspire courage for them to have courage in Jesus, have courage in who God says he is, have courage that God is exactly who he says he is, and the character and the nature of God should be what inspires their confidence and gives them hope and faith. Not what the leader brings to the table. That's not what should be inspiring their hope and their faith. But as a leader, if I hide my emotions and I can't show them and point them towards Jesus in all things, which for me is what a leader does. A leader goes first. A leader has a little more courage, a little more vulnerability, and just is a little further along the journey enough to say, you know what, I don't have the answer for that, but here's God, and here's what God has for that. Here's how Jesus answers that in my heart. And yes, I can identify with your fear, with your struggle, with your fragility, with your brokenness. And in that, here's the promise that I look to for God. Here's how God comes to me and meets me in that space. That to me is what leading through and in your brokenness does. It's very different than leading out of your brokenness. Leading out of your brokenness says, I have this broken thing in me and I need you as the people who are following me to fill it, to fix it, to feed it. That's not what I'm talking about, right? That to me is codependency and unhealthy. But rather leading with honesty, authenticity, transparency, and pointing people towards the sufficiency and the source of God is exactly what we should be doing. So if right now, as a leader, whether that's of your family, whether that's of your neighborhood, whether that's in a ministry, or just you're just part of another people group. Don't hide who you are and what you're going through, because if they don't see the struggle, they won't see the victory. If they don't understand what it looks like to need God, they will feel shame if they need God. If you don't demonstrate a healthy brokenness that's being sourced and answered through the Trinity, they will think brokenness is a sign of failure. So as a leader, dig your well deep, find your source in Him, and demonstrate that He is the answer for all things. Be a leader, go first, be vulnerable, and be a model for people of how to live an authentic life of a disciple.